You are listening to the Space-Tastic Mysteries podcast. We are starting Anna Gale Lyne's first novel in the Jaguar and Peacock series, Who Killed Ben? Federal agent and seasoned space vessel commander Jessa Strasser emerges from the wreckage of a devastating accident that claimed the life of her beloved husband, Ben. Returning to her duties with a heavy heart, she grapples with grief and unanswered questions, determined to uncover the truth behind the tragedy that shattered her world. As Jessa sifts through the remnants of her past life, she stumbles upon a mysterious box of items left behind by Ben. Within its depths lies a chilling revelation: the accident that claimed Ben's life was no mere mishap, but a deliberate act of sabotage. As they follow a trail of clues that leads them ever closer to the truth, Jessa and Nate find themselves confronting dark secrets and powerful adversaries hell-bent on keeping the truth buried. With danger lurking around every corner and time running out, they must race against the clock to expose the sinister forces at play before they become the next targets. This is Episode 1, The Beginnings. If you have not subscribed, do so now, and if you are on YouTube, hit the bell to be notified of new episodes.
Chapter 1. Ben, I'm pregnant, I told my husband, Benjamin Masters, who sat in the driver's seat of our state-of-the-art minivan. The way it smoothly guided us through the traffic that we faced traveling back to Andrews Air Force Base, in Washington, D.C., amazed me. Its internal navigational system pinpointed every troublesome spot and displayed an alternate route. When I announced I was pregnant with our first child, Ben insisted that we buy a practical, family vehicle. I had to admit that it came in handy when I needed to move a piece of furniture or chauffeur diplomats around Washington, D.C., but it wasn't my Porsche. There was just something about being behind the wheel of my Porsche that made me feel alive. I moved closer to him, laying my head on his broad shoulder. He kissed the top of my head. Oh, Angel. This one's a boy. I just know it. What do you think about the name Joshua? Since the day I agreed to marry Ben, he called me his angel sent from up above. He even wrote a song for me entitled, From Up Above, that he recorded with his band, the Space Vigilantes. The song spent 10 weeks at the top of the local music charts. Even in the dimness of the streetlights, I could see his cappuccino-colored eyes lighting up with a brightness that would have outshone the sun. Joshua Benjamin Masters it is, I agreed, smiling broadly. I love you. I love you too. Just then, a bright light from an oncoming car blinded my eyes. Shielding them with my hand, I looked up at the road. A car barreled through the intersection, then sped up and made a beeline for our car. Ben, watch out. I heard a deafening crash as metal slammed against metal. A sound that echoed in my ears long after the event. Thrown forward, I felt my body sail through the window shield like a missile flying through a war-torn sky. Pieces of glass erupted over the hood of the car and on the street below. I landed face down a few feet away from the vehicle, lying in a bed of jagged glass. Even though every bone and muscle in my body ached, I lifted my head to look back at the minivan. I saw Ben's dark head slumped over the steering wheel. When I heard the piercing cry of the sirens seeking us out, I collapsed back onto the asphalt. At that moment, everything went black. 6 months later. We need your help, Lieutenant General Preston Graham said. He and another man greeted me as I opened the door of my base house. Graham stood on the left. His dark blue dress, button-down, uniform announced his visit as business, rather than pleasure. His medals decorated the left side of his jacket while his nameplate and a pocket hung on the right. The belt around his waist made him appear as though he had lost several pounds. I noticed the 3 silver stars pinned to his lapel. He earned another star. Good for him. With his hat in his hand, he left his bald head unprotected from the sweltering rays of the Washington, D.C. sun in the springtime. Next to him stood Major Nathaniel Jaguar Masters. By the way Nate loosened his collar and opened the first button of his uniform, he appeared uncomfortable. I recalled him looking that way at many embassy parties, diplomatic functions, weddings, funerals. Basically, anytime his superiors required him to wear formal clothing. Behind the 2 men, a row of houses, all identical in shape and size, stood. They looked like a row of soldiers falling in for inspection. The yards in front of the houses were green and meticulous. Outside, no children played. No one rode their bikes. No one watered their lawns. It appeared as dead as a cemetery when the clock struck midnight, and just as eerie. Unlike Nate, I was a perfect soldier. I required excellence both of myself and everyone around me. My dark blue dress, button-down uniform, and my flight coveralls never saw a wrinkle, nor did the other uniforms that stood at attention in my closet. My chestnut brown hair, which I wore neatly pulled back into a ponytail, wouldn't dare move out of place without my permission. I even spit-shined my boots every morning. Only today, just like every day for the last 6 months, as I donned woodland camouflage fatigues instead of my flight coveralls, I felt a dull, empty ache gnawing at my soul. I wanted to go back to work, to command a star vessel again, to catch the bad guys, to wipe out a little more evil from this world. I stood with my back against the door, my arms folded. My cane hung on the doorknob. Without saying a word, I just watched them. If I stared at them long enough, I could usually get them to let me in on their plan. Alone, I could have made either of them crack in less than 10 minutes. Together, though, the task became more difficult, but still possible. "We need you to come back to work," Nate clarified, tilting his head to one side and pressing his eyebrows together. I graduated from the Intergalactic Intelligence Bureau training program, an intelligence organization that solved crimes in space, 12 years ago. After Nate's first partner died, General Graham assigned me to Nate. We'd become each other's best friend through the bad times, the good times, and the worst times. He had been my constant support. He'd been my rock. What would I have done if Nate hadn't been by my side these last 6 months? Being Nate's partner, I could tell the severity of a situation just by looking at his face. And this situation seemed to be very grave. "Why didn't you say so?" I asked, motioning them to come inside. I grabbed my cane, leaning on it. After waiting for them to step into the house, I locked the door and followed them. "If you'll join me in the kitchen, Joey just made some fresh lemonade, and I believe there is some leftover cake from Reggie's slumber party last night," I noted. I overheard Nate whisper to the general, "Don't worry, Peacock didn't make it. My sister Joey did." "I heard that," I yelled, slightly smiling to myself. I loved hearing Nate call me by my codename, Peacock, again. It suggested that the time had come for me to go back to work. He and I had been partnered so long that we referred to each other by our codenames. Mine, Peacock. His, Jaguar. When I hobbled into the kitchen, I found Nate reaching into the cupboard to pull down 3 glasses. He already set the dessert plates on the counter. He spent a lot of time here since the accident. He probably knew his way around my kitchen better than I did. Then again, the extent of my culinary skills consisted exclusively of spaghetti and meatballs and sandwiches. I walked over to the refrigerator. Nate scolded me, "You just sit. I'll get everything." I pulled out a chair. Before I sat, I smoothed out the wrinkles in my woodland camouflaged fatigues. Then I laid my cane on the floor beside me. Intertwining my fingers and resting my elbows on the round table, I stared straight at General Graham. I demanded, "What is this all about?" Graham licked his lips once before blurting out in a very steady voice, "We declared war on the Crimson Fleet last night, and we need our best star vessel commander to lead the fight." He tried to avoid my glance. A gesture he used when he wanted to hide something from me. He called me his best star vessel commander. He only did that when he desperately needed me to assist Nate in solving a case that suddenly became either messy or urgently important. And I suspected this case might be both. In 2100, with more space vessels exploring space, Earth's armed services joined forces to form the Freedom Alliance. Each branch functioned on its own as it always had. Only now they came under the rules and regulations created by the Freedom Alliance. Now, 51 years later, some members didn't agree with the Freedom Alliance's rules and actions any longer and broke away to form the Crimson Fleet. The Crimson Fleet wanted to establish a totalitarianism one-world government on Earth and all its colonies on other planets. When the Freedom Alliance tried to stop them, the people of Earth and its colonies took sides. Nate approached the table, passing around the glasses of lemonade and slices of sour cream pound cake. A fork accompanied each slice. Just before Nate sat down in an empty chair, he and the general exchanged a look. A dark, troubled look. These two were definitely covering up something. And I intended to find out what. Okay, that's the mission that you want Colonel Jessa Strasser to go on, I prompted, slicing a piece of the cake off with my fork. I put it to my lips, but before eating it, I gazed at the general. What's the assignment you have for Federal Agent Peacock Strasser? Graham took a sip of his lemonade and replaced it on the table before answering. Every time we plan a move, Peacock, the Crimson Fleet is one step ahead of us. You suspect a leak, I observed, rubbed my left pant leg and recoiled in pain. I then added, and you want me to plug it up? Worse than that, we suspect that the Crimson Fleet is working on a secret weapon, Graham reported. He stroked his chin and prodded a little too abruptly. So are you going to command the Liberty, Peacock? Or do I get someone else? I held up my hand. Now, when have I ever turned down a chance to go to work? I asked him while cutting another piece of my cake. I waved my fork from Graham to Nate and back again. I'm presuming that you have transferred all your suspects to the Liberty. The suspects are all senior staff members. Your first officer is Rochelle Polk. Head of engineering is Annie Ryan. Head of sciences is Elizabeth Meadows. Head of communications is Philip Genova, Graham confided, counting the names off on his fingers. I set down my fork and leaned back in my chair. Jag is obviously head of security. And we both know he is no traitor. I closed my eyes briefly and took a deep breath. You didn't mention my head of medicine. I hope he specializes in physical therapy, I declared, deliberately changing the subject. Even at a distance, I detected the strong fragrance of Graham's cologne that smelled like a combination of amber, cedar and oak, like going into the wood section of a home improvement store. A smell that somehow put me at ease. He's the best, and he's not on the suspect list, Graham remarked, then he chewed on his lip. He's an android, Peacock. He snapped his fingers repeatedly to remember the doctor's name. Dr. Lex Manning. My eyebrows shot up in surprise. An android? He has been through medical school and the academy. He did his residency at one of the Freedom Alliance hospitals. But this is the first time he will be on a star vessel, I concluded, digging my nails into the palm of my hand. He better have one magnificent bedside manner, I noted. Then your leg still hurts, Graham surmised. I thank God that I can feel my legs at all, I clarified, feeling the need to explain. After months of not knowing whether I'd walk again, a little pain isn't going to slow me down. The general laughed, giving me a sidelong glance. Like anything or anyone could, Peacock. I nodded, sipping my lemonade. When do we leave? You and Jag report to the Liberty in 2 hours. I know it's not a lot of time. You were always our first choice, Graham explained, his face tight and pinched. But we didn't know how quickly you would recover, so we picked someone else that didn't work out. And Nate told you that I am going crazy sitting at home, I supplied. Straightening up in my chair, I reached down to clutch my cane. So, you decided to give me the assignment. Right? Ignoring my comment, Graham retrieved a quan pad, an electronic notepad that held the memory of a full-sized quantum computer, from the inside jacket pocket of his uniform. He held it out to me. Peacock, here are your duty orders and personnel records. Nate chugged the last of his lemonade and ordered, we'd better get you packed. We only have 2 hours. Joey. It's time to go back to the Liberty, I called out over my shoulder. I caught Nate's eye as I turned back around. I saw the news last night, Jag. When I heard that the Freedom Alliance declared war, Joey, Reggie, and I started packing. Our luggage is in the closet near the door. I stood up, straightening my fatigues. With the aid of my cane, I moved around the table, gathered up all the silverware, plates and glasses and loaded them into the dishwasher. Once I closed the door to the dishwasher, it dispensed the detergent via algorithms. After washing the dishes, it would water the garden in the backyard with the wastewater. Moving toward the door, I yelled, "Come on, everyone. Let's get a move on." As I turned the doorknob and started unloading the closet, I thanked God under my breath for the chance to go back to work. I sat on the window seat in my office, studying the personnel files. Before starting every mission, I familiarized myself with each member of my senior staff, reading every comment their previous commanders made. I liked to prepare myself so I could head off any potential problems. Putting my mug of hot cocoa to my lips, I winced after burning my tongue. I stared at a picture of Lieutenant Colonel Polk, my second in command. The woman had cut her blonde hair into a bob that ended at her chin, had muddy brown eyes and looked as if she belonged on a runway instead of on a star vessel. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar. Where did I know Polk from? I racked my brain for the answer. Had I served with Polk before? No, that wasn't it. Was Polk in my classes at the academy? I didn't believe so. But from where did I know her then? Suddenly, I heard a childlike voice from the other side of the door scream, "But my mom's in there." Another voice, that of an older woman, yelled, "There are no children allowed aboard this vessel. Go say goodbye to your family and get off this star vessel now." "But my mom's in there," the child repeated. I could hear the tears in the child's voice. "No one is in there except Colonel Strasser." "If she's your mother, then I am the Queen of England," the other voice declared. I stood up and lifted my pant leg to retrieve my 9mm sidearm. I suspected that the gun would be unnecessary, but as a federal agent, I refused to go into a situation unprepared. And as a mother, protecting my daughter from this stranger became my top priority. Cocking it, I then hurried to the doors. After opening them, I found Lieutenant Colonel Polk grabbing the child by the neck. I commanded, "Let go of my daughter before I boot you off this star vessel." Polk's eyes widened in alarm at the sight of me pointing a gun at her. She removed her hands from the young girl, stuttering, "And no children are permitted aboard, ma'am." "This child has Generals Graham and Roland's permission to be aboard," I corrected. The child ran to my side, and I put my arm around the girl. "I'm Colonel Jessa Strasser, Lieutenant Colonel, and this is my daughter, Reggie Masters." I extended my hand to Polk, who shook it automatically. "And, Lieutenant Colonel, if you ever lay another hand on my child again, you won't see another day on this vessel or in the Freedom Alliance." Closing the gap between her and me, Polk gave me a pitiful look of appeal as a dog caught chewing on her owner's shoe. "I think we got off on the wrong foot," she uttered, studying my face. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Polk, your second in command. Otherwise known as the Queen of England," she added, almost apologetically. "Respect me, respect this star vessel, respect your fellow officers and respect my daughter, and we will get along. Don't and we won't. It's that simple," I warned Polk. The eyes of the other officers in Command Central focused intensively on the scene. "That goes for the rest of you too," I told the spectators as I ushered my daughter into my office.
If you would like to learn more about Anna Gale or to purchase her fiction and nonfiction books, go to AnnaGaleLines.com. That is ANNAGAILLYNES.com. Right now you can buy 3 ebooks and get the 4th one free. There you can sign up for the newsletter to keep up to date on what is happening in the world of the Anna Gale Lines podcast, where she inspires people to take control of their lives, and her science fiction podcast, the Space-Tastic Mysteries podcast. To follow her on social media, it is Anna Gale Lines on Twitter, Lady Anna Gale on TikTok, Anna Gale Lines Artist on Instagram, at the Anna Gale Lines podcast on YouTube. You can join the Facebook page at Author Anna Gale. Thank you for listening and thank you for being you.